that Jake Vanderkamp has organized, and those of you who are interested in Jade might want to come to that. With that, I'll introduce somebody who has become more of an annual event for us than I think anybody I can remember. Larry always brings in a crowd. I think he brings in a more varied crowd than just about anybody else. We have jazz musicians here. We have accountants here. Everybody who's interested in how the federal government is going to make ends meet. I was just mentioning to Larry, I'd seen something that for somebody born in my year, there's $120,000 in Medicare taxes that I pay on average over my life, adjusted for inflation, and the government is supposed to give me $360,000 worth of Medicare benefits, adjusted for inflation. How do you close that $240,000 gap per person, or 5 years worth of economic output for the average person? Do you do it through higher taxes? Do you do it through more efficient taxes?
No,
do you do it through sequesters? No, Larry has the answer. And so Larry's going to tell us what to do.
Before I tell you what to do, a word of warning. People have been known to walk along the street, step into a pile of dog doo-doo, and it turns to gold. If you ever hear about me investing in something, I walk along the street, and if there's gold there, I step on it, and I'm an alchemist in reverse. So do as I say, but don't do as I do. Okay, we're talking today about bungee jumping the fiscal cliff. The fiscal cliff. Sequestration. All new terms that we've never heard about before. This is covering my computer. I can't use it. This I need later on. I'll put that over there. Ta-da! The next thing. We're going to talk about the fiscal cliff, the American Taxpayers Relief Act of 2012, even though it was enacted in 2013, FATCA, FUBAR. You can't pronounce an acronym unless there's a vowel in between two consonants. FBAR doesn't work unless you want me to spit all over you if I'm looking you in the face. So I've added a U, and that more or less sums up exactly what it is. It's FUBAR. And what goes along with FUBAR? VD. I'll tell you what that means in a while. Okay, the fiscal cliff can perhaps best be explained by the Honorable Montgomery Burns in a 1 minute, 14 second animation. Okay, let's talk a little about numbers. Last year's budget. Put it in a little bit more of a proper perspective, okay? U.S. tax revenue, the last fiscal year, not this current one, the last fiscal year, $2,170 trillion in revenues. But what happens when you spend $3,820 trillion? You got a deficit of $1,650 trillion. That doesn't work too well, does it? Because ultimately, you've got a very, very sizable national debt. And this past year, the U.S. Congress really got together and made phenomenal budget cuts, $38.5 trillion. Okay, there are too many zeros on these. Let's change some titles and look at it in an alternative manner. Take away 7 of those zeros. Annual family income. And there are many of you who fall into that category. There are many more of you who say, gee, I wish I earned that money. $217,000. And we all know families who are spending a heck of a lot more, don't we? They've spent $165,000 last year more than they made. But that's okay. They owe $1,427,000. But they still own a $10 million house or a piece of real estate in Hong Kong. What does that tell you, even though they have reduced their budget by a minuscule amount? It tells you, A, they probably can borrow more, but B, they're heading for some hard times, and sooner or later, the excrement is going to hit the wind-producing machine. And we all know what that's like, don't we? We've all been there before. Okay, that's a brief explanation of the fiscal cliff. Let me tell you this. March 1st, we're going to reach that period that Congress has to make a decision. My gut reaction? I don't know. I don't think that even if there is no compromise, I don't think that there's going to be a problem. Do you honestly believe that they're going to take away those air traffic controllers and let the planes fly? No. There might be some inconvenience, but you know something? They'll resolve the matter. It's all politics. It's all politics. And speaking of politics, only the top wage earners, those who have declared income of over $400,000, are going to have the new old tax of 39.6%. 0.7% of tax filers from the United States fall into that category. That's not a hell of a lot of people. But you don't have to make $400,000 to feel the impact of the Tax Act. And that Tax Act, by the way, is not a 2012 Tax Act. That Tax Act, the American Taxpayer Relief Act of 2012, was voted upon at 2 o'clock in the morning on January 1st by the U.S. Senate, was voted upon and then passed by the House at 11 o'clock that night. And they voted on a compromise between Vice President Joe Biden and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. And what came out of that? 150 pages as a last-minute compromise. Now, if you believe that 150 pages is a last-minute compromise, there's a bridge crossing Brooklyn to Manhattan that I want to tell you, at a bargain. There was an abrogation of the democratic process here, and none of the press really picked it up. And that disturbs me more than anything else. Okay, what else will impact you, the taxpayer, this coming next year? Or actually this year. Your 2013 income is going to be impacted for 2013. Let's say that you have income of over $250,000 to $300,000. Well, you're going to notice that those itemized deductions, if you're itemizing, or those standard exemptions are disappearing. Why? Because it's Uncle Sam's way of telling you you're making too much money. Can you do something about it? Yeah, not make as much. I'd rather make money and pay more. I'd love to make money and pay more. Back to the machine. Okay, 3 more of the 6 things that I want to tell you that are worthwhile. If you're one of those 0.7% of high-income earners, guess what, my friends? If you have capital gains, long-term capital gains, you're not going to be subject to a 15% long-term capital gains tax. It's going up for you to 20%. If you are subject to U.S. payroll deductions, and there are some of you in this audience whose American-based firms take out Social Security for you. Well, guess what? You found out immediately in your first paycheck for 2013 that your take-home pay was not enough. You were getting less because the 2% payroll tax stimulation that helped try to expand the economy went the way of Cinderella's coach. At December 31st, 2012, it turned into a great big ugly-smelling pumpkin. 2% disappeared. There was one nice thing about the American Taxpayer Relief Act of 2012 that was actually voted on in 2013. And that is the fact that absolutely no one anticipated that the $5 million gift tax exclusion will stay in effect. Now, most of you here don't have $5 million to give away. But you've got friends who have made the money, and they do. If you or someone else you know has $5 million and wants to reduce their taxable estate, now is the year to give it, because I don't know how long a $5 million exemption will last, quite frankly. And what happens if you give $7 million this year? We all aspire to having $7 million to give away. But the amount over, technically $5,120,000 and a little bit more, is subject not to a 35% tax, but that goes up to 40%. I'm looking at the blank faces here and reaching a point of determination. None of you have $5 million to give away, so why am I bringing it up? It's okay. We know people who do. And they have to suffer for that additional 5%. Now's the one that I defy you to translate this. The 2013 Medicare tax. I'm sorry, I'm not going to call it the O-Care tax. It's not right. But part and parcel of what went along with Medicare changes is that high income earners, if you are a high income earner, 3.8% of the lesser of the tax filer's investment income for the year, or that filer's modified adjusted gross income, is, if that AGI is over a threshold of $250,000 if you're filing married, filing jointly, $125,000 if you're married, filing separately, or $200,000 for anything else, which means head of household, you're going to have a Medicare tax. But let me tell you, the U.S. government, the Internal Revenue Service, has absolutely no idea how to handle this yet. There are going to be new forms. There's going to be some double taxation involved. And this is not tax simplification. I have no idea how this one is going to work out. This is a can of worms that people haven't hit upon yet, and they will. Okay, now I'm going to go across something. I got to read to you. I'm going to read a little bit slowly. Let me explain this first. In the past couple of years, I've talked about FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. And if you really feel you want to refresh yourself, go to last year's YouTube from the FCC. I believe I spoke early in March. Go to the year before I explained FATCA. This year, on January 30th, somebody anonymously sent to tax analysts, one of the two journals that I write for, somebody sent, and they published on February 4th, a 2-paragraph explanation of FATCA as if the IRS were explaining it to you. This is pure genius. I love it, especially after the 544-page set of regulations came out. And before I read this, let me explain something about that 544-page set of regulations. If you were given a choice of reading either James Joyce's Ulysses or the 544-page FATCA regulations, I guarantee you Ulysses would be far more intelligible. And that's pretty darn difficult to do. Anyhow, this is as if the U.S. government is speaking. In our attempt to ferret out U.S. tax dodgers with foreign accounts we are using the only leverage we have, which is to threaten to impose 30% withholding on all U.S. source payments to foreign companies unless they fess up and disclose all their U.S. beneficiaries. Further, we are going to coerce foreign countries to enter into treaties. Oh, they can hear me. Can you? But the internet can't. Okay, now I'm back on this. Thank you. Further, we are going to coerce foreign countries to enter into treaties facilitating this disclosure by threatening to impose Byzantine regulations on their local financial institutions if they don't. We realize that the net result will be that tax dodgers with foreign accounts will simply move their accounts to banks in countries that don't have disclosure treaties and that don't have U.S. source income. So the net result will be to impose our massively complex regulations only on legitimate U.S. and foreign taxpayers. We recognize that this result will drastically reduce foreign investments in the United States in a time when it desperately is needed, and will add untold complexity to a world of increasing globalization. But we had to do something in response to news articles on some of the unreported foreign accounts. This is a 2-paragraph summary that more or less summarizes FATCA and what it's doing. No matter what you have heard, no matter what you have read, FATCA is an unmitigated disaster. The United States is emulating the People's Republic of China before it was the People's Republic of China. Long ago, the Qin dynasty was perhaps responsible for building a Great Wall. Well, the U.S. Congress is now building a Great Wall, the Great Tax Wall of America. We are keeping investors out of America. We are keeping American money from going overseas. This is wrong. This is absolutely wrong. Back to the PowerPoint. Anybody here bank with UBS? Anybody here bank with UBS in Switzerland? Very interesting thing happened last year. UBS lost a war. The United States has been in a tax war with Switzerland, and UBS had to plead guilty and lost a tax court case. Frankly, in the past 25 years, the United States has been involved in several skirmishes and several wars all over the world, and this is the only war the United States won, which is a sad commentary. Anyhow, winning that war, UBS, in the past month and a half, has issued a 5-page letter in French to all they believed were U.S. passport holders or U.S. tax filers. And they said, in essence, give us permission to turn everything over to the IRS or please leave UBS. My advice to clients, leave UBS, especially since last week they announced a new Switzerland FATCA IRS agreement, a treaty-like agreement. And 2 days after, I want to read you a sentence in the summary of this. I have a copy of this, and if anybody really wants to see it, I'll show you the treaty. That treaty is marvelous. Any given night that you guys can't sleep, pick up that treaty. 5 minutes, I guarantee you, it's the greatest holistic sleeping pill in the world. Okay, but I want to read what the Swiss Bankers Association 2 days later said. U.S. clients who refuse the transfer of their data must not be reported by name to the United States, nor must banking relationships be terminated. That does not apply to UBS, which lost a war, but it applies to every other Swiss bank. Only the IRS isn't going to tell you so. So those of you who have money in Switzerland, be aware that Switzerland is not the best opaque banking situation in Europe. Austria is. Be aware as well that you want opaque banking, you want to get away with something, go to Singapore. Okay, back to this. Where are we next? Okay, speaking of Singapore, I got to tell you about a rogue publication, the New York Times. On July 24th, 2012, great reporter Adam Davidson wrote, "My big fat Belizean Singaporean account, the Singaporean bank account." He told you step by step, not how to build an atomic bomb, but how to go opaque. You want to hide things? Go to Switzerland. Or wait for them to do away with the company's registry in Hong Kong. It's going to happen sooner or later. Hong Kong doesn't want Switzerland to get away with it. They want their fair share. Same thing. Okay. Where are we next? Okay. What's the IRS going to do about it? Are they going to combat this? No. They're taking steps one step further for the worse. Right now, if you are a company dealing with the U.S. purchaser of your goods or services, you might have received a form W-8-BEN. It's a one-page form where you have to list the beneficiary, the ultimate beneficiary of that company for tax purposes. It doesn't have to be filed with the Internal Revenue Service, but the company you're dealing with must have it on hand in order for them to pay you the money. The IRS, in its ever new and improved operating system, next year will have a 6-page W-8-BENE. And I guarantee you that the instructions which categorize the 16 areas you could fall into are beyond intelligibility. But then again, you don't expect anything else from the IRS. They've been doing this for years. That's why it keeps people like me in business. Now we come to my favorite part. FUBAR and VD. In this case, VD is voluntary disclosure. The IRS for the past 3 years has had a voluntary disclosure agreement on a system. That system is run by the Internal Revenue Service's Criminal Investigations Division. Is anybody here a criminal? I don't think so. Now, actually, I know one or two of you. You probably are. But that's besides the point. Assuming nobody here is a criminal, assuming nobody knew all the rules and regulations you are supposed to follow, you might be liable for filing. But why would you file through the Criminal Investigations Division of the Internal Revenue Service? Why would anybody in their right mind give up your statute entitled 3-year statute of limitations and opt instead to volunteer for an 8-year filing back period? Now, most of the law firms, most of the accounting firms are tickled pink to have you file 8 years. Look at all the additional fees they're going to get. It's wonderful, isn't it? And the fact of the matter is, if you had back filings and you didn't pay, you're responsible if you have large amounts for paying a 27.5% penalty. Let's say you're a poor SOB, like most of us, and you've never had more than $75,000 in your account. Well, the IRS will only take 12.5% if you file through the Criminal Investigations Division. Okay, so now you're asking, do I have to do this? No, you do not. And I'll tell you how to avoid this once I go back to the computer and switch the slide. Ta-da! Okay, we're in good time. You don't have to. I'll be able to finish. Okay. Okay. Thank you for the warning. Anyhow, you file Form TDF 90.22-1. This is the FUBAR form. But if you take a look at the second page of the instructions, midway through the left-hand column, it says, there is no extension of time available for filing this report. But if you file a delinquent FBAR, also attach a statement explaining the reason for late filing. And don't file this with the Criminal Investigations Division. File it as you're normally going to file an FBAR report. In Detroit, Michigan, which is so inundated with paperwork that unless you have $1 million or $2 million that you never declared, they're not going to look at you. Let me take some of that grape juice because my throat. I like grape juice. Okay. Now, we're just about at the end since Keith warned me. I'm going to end today as I began last year. I got 5 slides that are really, really, truly relevant. And I'm going to play a harmonica accompaniment to them. Now, let me tell you, I am a frustrated harmonica player. Tonight, if you were to go down to Bert's Bar, you'd hear some great jazz during the first set. It'll only turn into mediocre jazz during the second set because I'm playing a few numbers with the good group. Music director Alan Youngblood is here today. If you've never been down to Bert's on a Tuesday or Thursday night, go. Anyhow, let us begin. I leave you with the fact that not now, but sometime towards the end of the week, beginning next, you'll find the 3rd year of Larry's Tax Guide will be available at all ebook stores. It is technically accurate, but unlike any other tax book around, it's cynical and funny. And I understand that the last thing that anybody in their right mind at the end of the day will ever want to do is read a book on taxes. But if you're forced into it, this is the one to do so. Thank you. You're always a great audience. I'm here, by the way, not just for questions right now, but for as long as any of you have questions, I'm here. I'm all afternoon if you need me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Entertaining as always. Larry, who would I like to ask some questions now? Coming up, Martin.
Hi, on one of your slides, you had a quote from the Chinese authority that said that China will not cooperate. Well, give us
this was
about
the
that.
deputy director of the legal department of the People's Bank of China. And basically, he said that China will never agree on an individual basis. That does not mean that they might sign some form of a treaty. I'm not worried about that. Anybody who's dealt with a Chinese bank will understand when I say, if the IRS really wants to find out about me in China, I'll give them my branch address. I'll give them my accounts. Let them go there. Let them push the button and get a number. Let them wait online, and then let them go to the teller's window. And if they can get any more information than I've gotten out of the past 19 years there, they're entitled to it. Thank you for asking that question. I was waiting for that further remarks.
Francis.
Larry, two quick ones. The first is, what would be the right way for the U.S. government to go after what it's looking for, which is money from terrorists and people who were money laundering, etc.? What would be the right way to do it that wouldn't inconvenience nice folks? And the second question I have is, what's your personal opinion of the effort here by the Hong Kong government to remove from public access the personal information, the ID card numbers and addresses of directors?
The right way for the U.S. government to properly go after something is not through fear and intimidation, because what will happen is, as I said, we're going to an era of speakeasy banking. The 30s or the 20s, we had prohibition. And look at all those speakeasies that popped up. You need go no more than look at the Wall Street Journal today or the South China Morning Post and look at an advertisement for a Swiss bank that is publicizing private banking and publicizing all its offices around the world, and there is nothing there in the United States. What does that tell you? That's a buzzword. As far as terrorists are concerned, they're going to find ways, regardless of what, and there are going to be ways of monitoring that as the world becomes more sophisticated. I don't know. As far as Hong Kong is concerned, I disagree. I don't want the opaqueness. I believe that that openness is worthwhile. I have nothing to hide. Let Singapore do that. Remember, Hong Kong has a permanent place. It's needed by Beijing. You can't take a plane down to Singapore and one day sign something and go back to Beijing the same day. You can in Hong Kong, although those who are coming down to sign something are then going over to Macau, probably gambling with state-owned industry funds, then going to a massage parlor, and absolutely going after that to a Zhuhai hotel where they can deduct it, and then flying China Southern the next day back to Beijing.
Over here, please.
Are there any countries other than China that are saying they're not going to collaborate with this?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
I heard Japan said that they were saying, sure, we'll give you the data, but it's going to be in Japanese.
You're already, yeah.
That was
The
my-
UBS situation.
And then I have a second question after.
Okay. Yes, there are some of the Scandinavian countries. Sweden in particular has already said they're not going to comply. There are other countries that are coming up. Other countries are hedging. They are saying, wait, let's see what the United States does, because we are supposed to reciprocate. We are supposed to provide information on non-U.S. passport holders who have accounts in the United States. Well, when have any of you ever opened up a bank account in the United States other than presenting a driver's license and a social security number, whether that be your social security number or not? I had a social security card 50 years ago. I don't anymore. I think I remember my number. It could be incorrect. But the banks aren't monitoring this. And what ultimately happens? Beats me. Next half.
And the second question is, when this goes into effect, and let's say you have a bank that complies with this, is it starting today and going forward?
No, it is start.
They're going to go get historicals?
Right now, they have postponed it year after year after year. Right now, the banks are supposed to start monitoring things from January 1, 2014 on and reporting it in 2015. I'll lay odds that it's postponed another year.
Over here.
Just Keith mentioned in the beginning of the speech that Americans on average pay $120,000 towards Social Security if they get benefits
Medicare,
worth $350,000. What about Americans working overseas for non-American companies? What's their deal, if any?
I happen to be in the senior citizens class. I had the option of taking Medicare or not. I love living in this part of the world. I have no intention of moving back to the States. I declined the Medicare B or C supplements. you can avail yourself of all that Medicare has today, which might be drastically different tomorrow, if you go back to the United States for treatment. You want something here? Forget about it.
Over there, please.
Some clients tell me that because they are dual citizens, that since FATCA is really asking for information about American citizens, people that open up using the American passport, that they're not in any danger. But one client talked to a senior banker recently, and because of the January 2014 FATCA disclosure rules, that the senior banker told him that even if you are a dual citizen, we're devising a form to ask, did you study in the U.S.? How long did you live in the U.S.? Do you presently have a green card? Or do you have an American passport? They seem to be doing above and beyond what the IRS is asking. I think, to my knowledge, you either fill out a W-9 or you fill out a W-8 Ben. But more importantly, what I'm concerned about is that some clients say that so long as the bank doesn't have any clearing in the United States, and I don't know any bank that doesn't clear funds in the United States, that they will be doing this, that they will be enforcing, even if you bank with the Bank of China or any Chinese bank, unless it's a purely local bank. What's your reaction to this?
My reaction is I can't wait to see the United States say, oh, Bank of China, you're in violation. We're taking 30% of your profits off. All of a sudden, all the money that China is lending the United States is going to stop. I want to see the United States try it. Actually, what I am waiting for is to see the gut reaction of foreign banks, foreign governments, when they find that the U.S. isn't complying on what it committed to do. Mexico has been annually asking for years, please give us information, U.S. banks. We want to go after the drug cartels. They're not getting information. You want to open up perhaps the most opaque corporation in the world? Go to Delaware. Okay, too many people are going to Delaware? Go to Wyoming. We are the biggest violators of this.
So do you think there will be any reduction in tax evasion by dual citizen, or do they just keep doing business under the other citizenship, and can they keep it separate? It sounds like they do keep it separate.
I think they keep it separate. I think that those with dual citizenship are going to find banks that will not ask anything over and above and beyond that second passport that they are using. I think there are going to be ways to get about this. The fact of the matter is the IRS computer system is not one overall system. It consists of a lot of separate systems. Why is there a new Form 8938 to list higher assets? Because the IRS can't get any information out of Detroit, Michigan, because its FUBAR computer system is overloaded.
Senator Levin estimated that $100 billion a year in taxes is not being paid by overseas individuals with American citizenship. Does that sound plausible to you?
I don't think anyone has any idea. All I know is that the people I have come across who haven't filed in the past, most of them haven't filed because they were earning under the foreign earned income exclusion, and they never knew. The IRS has a publication, Publication 54, that supposedly tells everything you need to know if you are a U.S. tax filer living overseas. It's a great holistic sleeping pill.
Okay. 3 more minutes, one last question. Here we go.
This is a bit of a related question to the one on dual passports. Give you my particular situation, and if I was not in Hong Kong, I would think it only applies to me, but I'm sure it does not in this room. Have a Chinese wife who also has an Australian passport, so Hong Kong and Australian passport, and I have a U.S. passport. About to have a child. Is there any reason why the child should not have a U.S. passport at birth as opposed to having a U.S. passport and then throwing it in the trash at age 18 when he starts making money?
Throw it in the trash at age 18. You know, take the extra passport. You can take the exemption now. You can take advantage of it. If at any given time, all of a sudden you come into a fortune and you want to give it away, then have your kid get rid of the passport.
The one other caveat, though, I mean, first of all, throwing a passport as a symbol of the country might offend a lot of people. But separately from that, what South Korea has done is really interesting, which is if you're a dual citizen South Korean and they have a mandatory military obligation, even if you renounce your citizenship at 18, you are still required to do your mandatory 2 years of service. And if they even catch you at an airport on a different passport, you will be thrown into jail or into military service for 2 years, even though you've renounced citizenship. So there is an international effort to catch people who are renouncing citizenship. And you've already seen some of that in the US, for example, looking at the earned income but not unearned income. But I think quite aside from sort of respect issues, there are also potential legal complications as more countries try to look at longer-term ways to handle renunciation of citizenship for economic reasons.
Now, I would never. Let me just. What? You got two things to do. You've got to expatriate, but he probably paid more because he had an appraisal of Facebook before it tumbled down. But the fact of the matter is, you're afforded this opportunity to look at things and plan things. And at this stage of your life, if you are never going to go back to live in the United States, want to go back and visit, and yet you don't want to be captured by the tax system, there are alternatives. Look at them. I am never advising anyone, ever, anywhere, to disobey the law. You disobey the law, you can go to jail. I don't want to go to jail. But as long as the laws are laden with ambiguities and you have alternatives, avail yourself of those alternatives. It's all risk management. If you're a small-time taxpayer, maybe you can take more of a risk. Think about it.
And there's always the moral issue if your family has fought for the country or if you have a personal love of the country, whether or not you renounce citizenship. I played the Army game in Vietnam.
I have pangs of patriotism every time I go to a U.S. ball game and I hear the Star-Spangled Banner. And about the only thing that annoys me is that the final two words of the Star-Spangled Banner are never mentioned. Play ball.
Thank you very much, Larry.